Welcome to the Scarf Bergara War, proudly sponsored by the Players' Entrance at Covent Garden Cafe and the Royal Oak Edgeley.
Oh, great flick on by Alan Armstrong. Oh, what a beauty! Oh, what a beauty! I waited all my life for that. What a screamer! An absolute screamer!
Welcome everybody to Dark Days Part 4B, or Part 5 as I'm going to call it. Real apologies that it's been 5 months since our last one, and a lot's happened since then at County that are putting these Dark Days into bright sunny days, but we'll stick with the Dark Days theme. We've got our usual guests, or well, they're not even guests anymore, they're like the part of the furniture. We've got Dave with us, Dave Espley. You alright, Dave?
Hi Russ, yeah, you alright lads?
We've got Phil Brennan. You alright, Phil?
Good evening.
Good evening, and we've got podcast aficionado himself, or is it a vlogcast? I don't. What is it you do now, Dave Schofield? What is it?
Oh, I'm like a multi-instrumentalist, musician, poet, actor, director, you name it, and I just put everything out there. I mean,
Renaissance man,
collector of famous followers.
Yeah, actually, I've got some very famous followers. Yeah, I mentioned right at the start of these Dark Days. You know, I'm a bit fuzzy on some names and what have you, because I was kind of high on drugs at the time, for Class A drugs. But Greg Hall, who I have mentioned a couple of times and in glowing terms, is a great guy. He's from Sandbach. It was him who came with me to the renegotiation. You know, with the administrators. So Rob Reckless definitely came with me the first time, and Greg Hall came second. Greg was a top guy. His brother as well, really nice bloke.
So, just going back to the Dark Days then, we finished the last episode at the end of the season where we got relegated into the National League North. Daria Kalazic had just left the club. We played Kidderminster. We didn't talk about some of the antics that went on at the Kidderminster match.
There was something that really gets on my nerves about occasionally football fans. Their sort of high spirits turn into knob-headedness, right? And it's a very, very emotional game, isn't it? And I can't stand it when people say these so-called fans. You know, you've got people who follow County all over the country, home and away, and all right, let themselves down for 20 minutes or something because they've just got themselves too emotional. But to in any way cast aspersions on the fact of whether they're real fans or not, it's just like, I don't want to hear that.
That phrase, so-called, is like the go-to phrase for people who want to clutch the handbags and clutch the pearls and condemn other people in their peer group for not behaving as they behave. And it's used in more context than football, but you're dead right. So-called fans, of course they're fans. Bugger off.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just going back to that, I mean, we've got, going back the season before, on when there was the pitch invasion and I was doing a co-com, and there was lads on that pitch, some of them that I introduced to County when they were like 14, 15, and you can't tell me that after 30 years of following the club, then they're so-called fans. Right. And you're right, Dave, the same thing happened at Kidderminster. And again, there was a lot of people on that pitch that I knew. I'm not saying they were right, I'm not saying they were wrong, but they were certainly fans of us, still are certainly fans of Stockport County. If you remember, our board members were banned from going to the game at Kidderminster.
Yeah, were they though?
They were, yeah. And the whole thing, the whole bad taste about the day started the week before, because Kidderminster's chairman made it public knowledge that he had told our board members to stay away because he thought that them being at the game was going to instigate trouble from our fans should Kidderminster go ahead and win the game. And it was a nonsense. It just was a nonsense. I mean, I remember making notes about it all at the time, and I've sort of gone through them all. And there was, you know, it's very easy to blame a club with a big fan base that have had some problems going to a game where their existence was on the line, because we didn't know, nobody knew how things were going to go if we'd have got relegated that day. Nobody knew for sure that Stockport County would exist the following season. And the fact that, if you remember on the day, I'm sure you were there, they actually opened only half of the away section.
That's right.
And they tried to cram in everybody into some seats and half of an open end. And the other half of the open end had about 12 Kidderminster fans in it. And more county fans were getting squashed into that section. And I remember saying to JK on the COCOM, this is just a recipe for disaster. Somebody's going to get really badly hurt, or county fans are just going to spill into that end whether they want them to or not, because there will be people in there fearing for the safety.
Yeah.
And then I think they probably got to about 30 Kidderminster in that open end. And then they stupidly started antagonising the 3,000 or so county fans that were squashed into a space with 800 or whatever it was. And it just escalated from there. And this was long before kickoff. So there was a lot of things that led up to that. That actual, not just getting beat and well beaten as well. I mean, they were a much better side than us. We knew that. And we'd lost it by drawing at Gateshead, hadn't we? Or Hartlepool was.
Yeah. We were dreadful.
But I agree. I mean, the thing is that it's so easy. I mean, listen, nobody's condoning the fact that players were getting pushed around, and
No.
But at the end of the day, they are and still are Stockport County fans, and some of them are still banned from that day who still don't go to games because of their over enthusiasm or stupidity, whichever way you want to look at it.
Yeah.
I'm not questioning their heart. It's it was just a really surreal day all day long, especially from being a member of staff at the time and somebody who followed the club for 40 odd years. It was just soul destroying watching everything sort of go below us.
Yeah, I think you're right in what you say as well. That to go back to Dave's point originally, you can condemn what happened, and you can sort of say that's wrong or whatever because it doesn't tally with your view on how you should watch football. But it's the so-called fans bit, I think, that is beyond the pale. I mean, no one can really condone going on the pitch and taking a swing at one of the players.
Definitely not. No.
I'm pretty sure no one had condoned that, but they are fans and they've been pushed so far that they'd snapped, and that's the way those particular fans chose to or didn't choose to. They were unable to choose. It was just an instinctive reaction.
Yeah.
And you push somebody so far, you don't know how they're going to react. But to try and imply that they're not fans, as I think we've made pretty clear, is just ridiculous.
Yeah. Anyway, you wanted to say that, so there we go.
No, you're right.
No, you are.
So, I mean, I think obviously we touched on the fact that Spencer was on the radio saying that he'd got somebody in mind to come in, and he was thinking of Steve Bellis, and I knew for a fact that Steve Bellis, I'd spoken to Steve. Steve at that time didn't have the inclination, the time, the energy, whatever else it was. He couldn't have come to the club. But Spencer had gone live on the radio saying that, we're bringing a big name back to the club and this, that and the other. And in the end, it was JK who was made a director because, without being unkind to JK, there wasn't anybody else that was a name, if you like, that could show to become. And John definitely didn't want to be a director until obviously he was talked into it by Spencer. But I think the next big thing that really happened, obviously after the dust had settled, was we as a club. Obviously, we were looking for any excuse or any reason to stay up. And in the previous 10 seasons, 9 teams have not been relegated from the National League, usually because of ground issues and or financial issues, or of clubs coming up, if you know what I mean. So the teams that were supposed to come up couldn't come up, and the team that finished in the top relegation place, that sounds good, doesn't it? Finished top of the relegation league. we finished there, so we were quite confident that there was clubs, that there was a reason that we would stay up, and the main reason was that Aldershot were getting relegated from the Football League. and Aldershot were in administration. And the conference/National League rules quite clearly state that any club dropping from the Football League in financial difficulty/administration would automatically go through the conference and go into the north or south, whichever suited. So we got a little bit excited about that behind the scenes. Without going public with it, we were quite confident that that would happen, that we would stay up. Because of the fact that, as I say, 9 teams over the previous 10 seasons have not been relegated. In fact, I think Alty had been saved 3 times because of that. So that was something that we were holding on to. And the meeting at Celtic Manor, which is obviously the AGM,
yeah,
I was at a couple of days before the AGM, and again at the time, I think Ryan was going down, Tony Whiteside, not sure who else was going, but there was, that was what they were holding on to. And I got a call from somebody I knew quite well. I can't name him because it's not fair, but said to me that we would be getting relegated. The rumour was that because over the years of our being in non-league, the 3 years we've been in non-league, our reputation as a club, being Billy Big Time behind the scenes, and obviously with the troubles on the pitch, they used every excuse to sort of lump it all together. That they were going to change the rules for that season, and Aldershot were going to be welcomed with open arms because they'd reformed as a non-league club and they'd gone up to the Football League. So in everybody's eyes, they were still a non-league club, and that's what happened. They stayed up and we went down. I'm not saying for 1 minute we deserved to stay up, but the rules were changed and we went down because of that. I mean, I can't prove that. All I can say is that a very high up person at the time told me that's what would happen, and it happened. And when Ryan came back from Celtic Manor, I asked him, and he said that's exactly the sort of take on it that he'd sort of taken on from the meeting, that they couldn't wait to get rid of us from the National League, and they needed a reason, and the reason was that Aldershot were a family member.
Well, fair enough. I mean, if that's what happened, that's what happened. That Billy Big Time, we spoke about that before, haven't we? If you think, we're too big for this, too good for this, and all the rest of it, then it might be true, but it's not reality. And you're certainly, in saying that, you're denigrating everyone around you, aren't you? So you reap what you sow.
Yeah, I mean, in the time that obviously, I would never say that we acted really big time, but I've told you before there were times when we didn't send board members to games. We would. There was a game, I think it was at Grimsby, where the only representatives of the club were myself and Grace Conroy.
Yeah.
And we were both members of staff. We weren't on the board, but there were no board members went to the game.
It's just disrespectful, isn't it?
Well, it is when you think that most non-league clubs, when they came, I mean, I know it's a day out, but when most non-league clubs come to county, they're all there, suited and booted. Every member of the board's there, and it's you've got to play the game, Dave. That's the way it is in non-league football.
Well, it didn't matter because we had this revolutionary guy in charge of running the club, and I'm just going to give you a couple of his quotes. He said, what I'm going to do first and foremost is to create a club that doesn't allow the chance of what has gone on at this club in the past 10 years to ever happen again. That's an absolute must. So I think it's worth pointing out that what had happened in the past 10 years is we got promoted to League One. Anyway, it's gone through a horrendous period of unnecessary pain, and there is simply no need for that to happen again. Part of this is elevating the expectations of everybody connected to Stockport. Not for 1 second am I going to allow anybody, and that includes the fans and everybody that works at this football club, to think that because of the hard times, it hasn't got the right or the resources to get back where it was, or even beyond that. No organisation I'm thinking of will be thinking like that. And that's exactly what he did, wasn't it? Well done, Ryan. Cheers for that, mate.
The thing is, he's not the first, and he won't be the last football bullshitter. I mean, we've had enough. We've talked about enough in these Dark Days
30 years
podcasts.
of age, he was a prodigy, wasn't he? A prodigy football bullshitter.
But the thing is, with football, and this is something I've said before, that football fans are so desperate to support their club in literally any way they can, that if bullshitters come along, and we've talked about them in these podcasts, fans will jump at what they say and want to believe every single word with what they say.
Yeah.
You remember Tony Evans being interviewed on the pitch for the TV game we've mentioned, being clapped from the stands. I think when someone took over, it might have been Evans, I'm not sure. On the message boards, they arranged a celebratory night on the piss in Edgerley. And people were saying, hang on a minute, we don't know anything about these guys. They've got dodgy track records, but fans want to be told everything's great, basically, and they want to believe it, and they will believe it. So, in a sense, what McKnight was saying there, it didn't necessarily go down well, I wouldn't have thought, but I bet quite a few fans thought, oh, he's the guy we need. He's saying the right things.
Right, home game coming up. Where are we going? What's your pre-match plan?
Usually Bobby Peel for me.
Phil, what about you, Dave?
Well, as we've already established, I'm a Tory, so I'll just bring G&T from home and drink it in the back of the car.
What about you?
Where are you going? Bobby Phil?
Yeah.
How many tellies have you got?
5, I think.
Oh, mate, you're not going to believe this. You want to get down to the Royal Oak.
Why? What's so good about the Royal Oak?
We've got tellies, we've got big tellies, we've got small tellies, we've got tellies when you're ordering a drink, we've got tellies when you're having a piss, they've got tellies when you're having a cig outside. Tellies!
Aside from that, it's a really good place to go before the match, and alcohol is also available.
Yeah, I remember you, Phil, saying to me that this guy is either going to be the best thing that ever happened to this football club based on what he's been saying, or the worst thing that ever happened to this football club based on what he's been doing. And which
was it?
Which way are we leaning?
Thanks for hanging me out there. No, no, you're right. I mean, when you listen, you want to like him. You want somebody who. The problem is, it sounds really odd. I quite liked him.
Yeah.
I just, I mean, the other thing is, again, we're probably digressing a bit. That we'd given Ian Bogie the job because he hadn't kept us up. He hadn't even not quite kept us up. He just hadn't kept us up. He didn't have the time. He didn't have the players, whatever. But he was given the job on a full-time basis with a full-time budget, and we'd driven round, I think, Bramhall and places like that, looking at houses because he was relocating.
Yeah.
And on I think it was probably the Thursday or Friday, we'd had a good drive round. We'd actually agreed a deal to bring the training ground back to Stockport. We'd done a deal with Stockport Rugby Club. They had plenty of grass, plenty of pitches, and it was back in Stockport, and it all seemed to be the right thing to do because obviously we didn't really have any hold at all on there. Simply at the time, I think it was Rochdale were there. There were probably about a dozen part-time clubs on there. It rapidly become a really poor place. That poor repair. There were no groundsmen there or anything like that belonged to us. So, and the Stockport rugby thing, even though it was rugby, it suited. It was a lovely place. So we'd done a deal with that, and we were looking at houses. And then there was a meeting, I think, on the Monday, and Bogie had said to me that he asked me what time I was working in the office till, and I said, probably till late. And he said, well, I'll sit and have a brew with you because I've got a board meeting, look through the budgets and stuff like this. And he was genuinely quite excited. He got a few players lined up. And then later that night, he rang me up and he genuinely sounded upset. And I said, what's the matter? He said, I'm just on my way back to Newcastle and we're going part-time. And I said, what do you mean we're going part-time? He said, we're just going part-time. I've been told that the budget's cut less than half. All the players that we've sounded out, none of them can come because they're all full-time players. And we've got like 3 weeks or whatever it is, 4 weeks. It was only a short period of time. So, and now you have to remember that neither Ian Bogie or anybody apart from Lordy was from round here. None of them knew the non-league scene. The only player that we'd actually agreed to talk to bring in was Christian Dennis, who the season before had got 60-odd goals, in the level below. So he wasn't really a gamble because he was a part-time footballer. Well, he was willing to stay part-time, I think, at the time. So we didn't have any. The players that we were bringing in after that We also had Rob Clare had resigned about a month or so before the end of the previous season, and because we'd gone part-time, we hadn't replaced him. We'd actually talked to Simon Dawson. I knew that Simon had wanted to come work into the club before. So I don't know who interviewed him, but he was interviewed, but he wasn't offered a job because he couldn't afford to go part-time. So we had no commercial manager, and it was agreed that I would take on the title, but Ryan would drive all the commercial sponsorship and partnerships. And on reflection, I shouldn't have said I'd do it, but at the time, it was like, well, you're a fan, everybody knows you, you're a good sell, people won't buy through Ryan, you be the front, and Ryan will drive the business. And on top of everything else I was doing, I thought, well, do you know what? I'll have a go at it. I actually spoke to Steve Bellis, and he came down. We had a sponsors evening at the Plough, and Steve agreed to come down to give me a bit of a lift, to sort of get people involved. And he was brilliant on the night, gave a great speech. We had a lot of sponsors there, and just suddenly people started to forget the fact we were part-time. But, at the back of my mind, we were struggling to sell whatever it was. All of a sudden there was the people we'd got people saying, well, I'm not putting money in until we know what's going to happen. Well, you can't run the business like that. Do you know what I mean? And then, of course, Spencer resigned. Yeah. 2.5 weeks after we dropped, Spencer resigned, which then caused even more problems for, we're trying to get sponsors. Well, what's happening? Where's Spencer gone and this, that and the other? So there was a lot of things going on behind the scenes. Another thing that happened during that same period was we had a fire sale. To raise money, we started selling things from within the club. Like tractors at the training ground and things that you don't need. You haven't got a pitch, so you don't. There was lots of things like the TVs out the boardroom were sold for cash to keep money coming into the club. There's so many little things that were going on that were causing more and more issues. And, it was difficult. I mean, I had several emails from people that were associated with the club for some time who refused to put any money into the club as a sponsor. Yeah. Even though they've been sponsors for years, they didn't want to put any more money in until they could see that Ryan was running the club in the right, driving it forward, I should say.
But that's so tin pot, isn't it? What you've just described is so fucking tin pot. Selling tellies off the wall for cash.
Yeah, and the worst thing from my point of view is I went on a very short holiday. It was only 8-9 days just before, in close season. Towards the end of close season, I've talked about this before. It's difficult to book your holidays because you're more busy as normally. But anyway, and stayed at Fitz's place, and by this time we'd got rid of all. I think Cashy had gone by then. I may be wrong with my timing, but I think Cashy had gone. Fairly sure Grace had gone. Janice had gone. There was literally next to nobody in the office anymore. Yeah. And even my part-time media assistant, Liam, had been binned off quite unceremoniously, to be honest. After being told they weren't going to get rid of him, they did get rid of him. And we brought in a load of students from Burnley College. And they were going to do the job. 5 students were going to do the job between them. And I've put my hand on my heart and tell you, one of them I never saw, and I don't think he ever set foot in the ground. One of them was a girl who was good on the day she was there, but again, only came when she felt like it. And the other, the best of the lot, was actually a Burnley fan. He was actually not a bad lad at all. And then there was a lad called Harry, who was a County fan, who again was doing it all for the right reasons. But before my holiday, we had a big whiteboard. You know how fond I am of a whiteboard, and it had a list of all the people that were to be contacted by Harry and the other lads with regard to sponsoring, while to make sure that we didn't lose that 10 days or whatever it was I was away, that we didn't lose any impetus. And when I came back off my holiday, not a single person had been called. So I asked, what's going on here? Why have none of these people been contacted? And Harry looked at me quite sheepish, being a county fan, and said, we were told not to do it. We were told to wait till we came back. As Ryan said, we had other things to do. So I go into her and say, look, what's gone on? Well, we've got plenty of time to catch up with people, sort of thing. And it's just like, well, we've lost 10 days. We are now 10 days closer to the season. And I think, in fact, the day I came home, we played Roger Wild's testimonial. That's how close we were to the season starting. So we literally brought in the first person I saw when I got to the ground, because I literally got to the airport, went home, dropped my kit, and came straight back to the ground for the testimonial. And Jamie Hand was warming up. And I was like, oh my days. That's how far we've fallen. We're signing somebody that, I believe he's got a good career in coaching. To be fair, he wasn't the sort of player I was hanging my hat on at County. That was, when I came back to that, I just knew that things weren't going to be much better.
Yeah. Spencer Fair, before he went, he said it was very much, part-time was very much a temporary measure, which we will review when we win promotion. And of course, 6 years later, we won promotion and decided to carry on part-time. So, you could see, Spencer was right. He could see the writing on the wall. He thought, I've put enough money into this. Fuck it. And you can't blame him, really.
Playing devil's advocate, I'm sort of talking along the same lines here. If we hadn't gone part-time, then presumably that first season down would have incurred a big loss because the revenue had dropped massively.
Yeah, but we had people who owned the football club who had the money to keep us full-time and put right the complete clusterfuck that they'd overseen. Yeah. That was only one part of the clusterfuck. We should have never have been in the National League or whatever it's called. I'm
with you 100%. I've gone on record as saying that the very least those people should have done was paid out whatever it would take to put us back to where we were when they took over, then written it all off. That morally, that's what should have happened. Yeah, but realistically, though, if they'd have racked up another debt in trying to get promoted out of the National League North at the first attempt and failed, then the club would have been in a arguably worse position because we'd be where we were anyway, but with a massive debt from throwing money at it and failing.
That's where we ended up anyway. If we'd have had a positive response that had said, no, we're staying full time. We've already signed this guy Christian Dennis, who was going to be a success. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And it is our intention to be promoted back to the national level immediately. And we will not accept anything other than that. That is it. That is what everybody and everything at this football club is going to focus on. The irony of it all is that county fans will finance that because they turn up and pay the money. And we had a meeting with Ryan McKnight. It was fair play to him. He was ballsy enough to meet everybody. There was about 20 people turned up at County and was in one of the meeting rooms. And he was taking questions from people. And it was like watching a Boris Johnson press conference.
Was that the one up in the Cheadle, Dave?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Is that the one I chaired and then snuck out the back?
Yeah, it was awful. And I said to him, I asked him why we weren't going to spend £15,000 advertising the season tickets, and he said, "Well, we haven't got £15,000." So I said, "Well, we'll find it because what you're actually talking about, the plan you've just laid out to us now, is a reduction of £400,000 worth of income. That's what you're planning to do." And it was like I'm looking at him thinking, you've just said we're going to bring in £400,000 less on purpose, and yet you're not prepared to risk £15,000 to prevent that from happening. And it was quite clearly deliberate. The decision had been taken, cut everything, cut until there's nothing left to cut. And that, to me, was no way to run our football club. It was a disgrace that the owners of our football club thought that was an appropriate way to manage us and to operate us. Absolute disgrace, and they should all be ashamed of themselves.
There was another thing that was quite a serious thing that went on behind the scenes as well. I think I told you before that Steve Cree, through his business, was our main supplier for the club shop. And to be fair to Steve, done a fantastic job. Not only did he supply stuff, he didn't charge us for it.
Yeah.
He only took the money at the end of every month. I paid him what we'd actually sold. So basically, we'd done our biggest turnover in profit in the shop for several years. And Steve played a big part of that, and I've often said that to people. Because once Steve came in and we suddenly had stock in the shop, the other suppliers that were very hesitant about giving us stuff realised that actually this looks good, this shop, I want to be part of it. And we suddenly started getting other companies coming to us, like all sorts of stuff, mugs, everything. But during that period, and again, either just before I went on holiday or just after I come back off holiday, I can't quite remember exactly when it was, but we suddenly got a load of fleeces and bags and stuff arrived in the shop that I hadn't ordered and I'd never seen them before, and apparently they came from a supplier that we'd given us a board. I think they put something on the railway end, and they were a Sheffield company, and I was told that we were going to use them for all our products. And I said, well, hang on a minute, I don't pay for my products. Oh, this is all part of the sponsorship deal. So I said, well, I've still got stock in the shop that belongs to Steve Cree, and we need to make sure we sell that because obviously he'll keep placing it. Oh, we're not using Steve Cree anymore. So I said, what do you mean we're not using Steve Cree anymore? Because we're going to put everything through this company in Sheffield. So I said, well, I wouldn't do that for two reasons. One, it's morally wrong, but two, and I don't think Steve would mind me saying this, Steve's quite a big gob. If you renege on a deal with a high-profile county fan who has actually given us a massive leg up on to making a lot of money, if you don't pay him what we owe him, he won't hide behind Yellowboard. He'll tell everybody. And that's the worst thing you can do. Well, whatever you need to do, you need to not do it. We're not getting any more stuff off him. And I said, well, that's unfortunate because I've actually already ordered a load of stuff for him. I let Steve know that they weren't going to pay him. And he got paid and he carried on supplying us. So he obviously said the right things to the right people. But it just showed that the sort of thing that could have happened if I hadn't spoken up, if Steve hadn't spoken.
What it shows is that the people who were operating the club had no regard for the reputation of the football club whatsoever. And it's shameful. It's utterly shameful that they should have overseen such a Fred Carno circus, and then not put it right. And people say, oh, well, we did put it right, because we got a bit lucky about 5 years later that Jim Gannon didn't piss off and go and get a job somewhere else. Honestly, it is a very frustrating period for all concerned. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure that their asses were going with the amount of money they were losing and everything else. But if you take on the responsibility of owning a football club, it's not like any other business. I think I read today something like it's only been about 20 football clubs in 150 years have gone out of existence. So there's been some really shit owners in that 150 years. But it demonstrates just how hard people try to keep the club going because they value the club's reputation, their own reputation, and the importance it plays in the local community. And I've said on many occasions, we've talked about Burnley a couple of times on this podcast. Who would know where Burnley is if it didn't have a football team? Who would know where Norwich is if it didn't have a football team? It's that important. And to trash the football club in terms of its status, in terms of its reputation, it's utterly shameful.
Dark days, I'll say. Them days were dark, weren't they? They were dark, them days. They were dark, alright. I've never seen days so dark. Some of the darkest days ever they were.
Yeah, they were right fucking dark.
there's quite a sinister sort of, just to wrap that pre-season up, and I won't mention names, but as I said to you, I'd had a few emails telling me that they were no longer going to put sponsorship in until Ryan was no longer at the club. And I think there was a few things that went by at the time that people didn't want him at the club for whatever reason. Fans didn't want him. Things weren't from outside. I mean, it's difficult because I was on the inside, but from talking to people would be saying, no, I'm not putting any more money into the club until he's gone. Well, that's not my decision. Do you know what I mean? I was fronting up the commercial side of things, and I needed them to commit, and they weren't prepared to commit. And it came to a head on a Sunday when Richard Park, who rang me to say that he was concerned at what I'd said about, sponsorship withdrawals, and we were on the phone. I'll tell you how long we were on the phone. He rang me, and my missus came upstairs to say we're going doing our big shot, realised I was on the phone, went out, did the big shot, came home, put it all away, and I was still on the phone. That's how long I was on. And to be fair to Richard, it was the first and only time that I ever had a really long, in-depth conversation with him, and the guy was genuinely concerned at what was going on. So it asked me to put it into an email and copy him in, which I did. But, with all the other things, that correspondence I'd had. And then a few days or a couple of days went by, and I get an email from the chairman, and I've still got it, and it says, "Hi Phil, thanks for the emails regarding sponsorship withdrawal. This is a very worrying trend indeed. I am really between the devil and the deep blue. If I force Ryan out, then Spencer is likely to make life difficult." Well, he put live. He is likely to make life difficult so far as his loans are concerned. He is also negotiating with a couple of would-be investors, and any further upheaval could well mean that they would walk away too. I fear that we will have to keep him on at least until we get through the next few weeks, which financially ain't going to be easy. I will write separately to blah, 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 to see if I can get them to think again and let you know the outcome. Meantime, I'm afraid we soldier on.
Hear me, to think that Ryan McKnight was an asset that the club could not do without, and that potential investors would be put off if he was removed.
Well, I'll just tell you that the two emails that I've got in front of me there amount to best part of 100 grand.
Is that 100 grand a year then? Is that 100 grand a year that those two brought in?
The figures all together with what we were being told wasn't coming in it was in the region of 90 grand. I think those two together were like 30 grand. But it was the start of a very steep hill. 30 grand is a big start. And we have to remember as well, for some reason we decided we were having 3 kits that season. I won't go into the reasons why, but we were having 3 kits that season, and we could not sell our front of shirt for love nor money. In the end, I did a deal with Life Leisure, so they did the front of the first shirt. We did a deal with, funny enough, Andy Calvert did the Argentina away kit, and I think it was Lemick did the horrendous orange third kit that we had, that was brought in because it reminded somebody of a Dutch team that we were having this Dutch manager, but he'd gone by the time the shirt came out. So, yeah, it was a difficult time.
But what I was getting at is, if you just do the sums, then the sponsorship that you've lost, unless Ryan McKnight was on an inordinate amount of money,
which he was,
60.
I don't know, maybe the sums don't add up then. But to me, just at a very basic level, you've got this money coming in.
Grand. Now I've said 100 grand. I think the figure in my mind was saving 60 grand wage and 40 grand off these emails made it up to 100 grand. I think that was my thinking.
Right, so 40, sack the guy and you got 40 grand profit is what it basically boils down to.
Yeah. And you didn't have to pay out 60 grand in wages. But to be fair, those wages did get reduced to, what was
48. Yeah, it took a 20% pay cut.
But it just went from bad to worse. I mean, I was sort of hanging on by a thread by the time we kicked off pre-season. I mean, to be fair, just talk about football for a minute. Pre-season, the results, forget the results. Christian Dennis scored 12 goals in pre-season. And amongst all the players, I mean, we brought in Phil Jevons, Reece Turner had come in, Ian Howard. So we'd actually brought in some half-decent players on part-time, wages, and the results, regardless, we got through the pre-season, and Christian Dennis looked on fire, and we were thinking, well, even part-time, we should have a chance. But obviously, once the season started, things just didn't go well at all. But where the football's concerned, I think the other thing as well, I just need to say again, big up to Elk the Hatters at the time, who once again came in right at the death of close season and lent me personally the cash to buy a load of stuff to put in the shop, because we had mini kits for kids for the first time in years, and Elk the Hatters paid for them. Well, I paid for them, and if they didn't sell, I would have had to give the money back to Elk the Hatters, but luckily they sold. So again, we were getting the right sort of help from the right sort of people, and despite the fact that things were quite clearly not good behind the scenes.
Question for you both. If you could recreate one sporting moment and be there doing it yourself, what would it be? Russ?
Winning putt in the 1992 Open Championships to replicate Nick Faldo.
Golf then?
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah, I don't know, not my thing. About you, Dave?
Well, I'm a Tory, as you well know, so I go and watch cricket. And I was there along with John Billsbury, friend of the podcast, the Tea Party podcast, and we were both there when Ben Stokes hit the winning runs in the Headingley Test on that famous Sunday a couple of months ago, so I would recreate that.
Even I watched that. I'm going to have to go for a county moment now, aren't I? Top of my head, Glenn Taylor's header for Spennymoor against Chorley, all the way.
Get in.
So why have you asked us that, Ernie?
Because it's a little message from our new sponsors, the Players Entrance in Mersey Stockport, where you can go and recreate many sporting moments.
And it's run by a county fan.
And
it's got Darren Stevenson on the wall. There's a mural of Darren Stevenson on the wall.
Doing an overhead kick, I believe.
Doing an overhead kick.
I'm going to get on for it. I don't want him doing that. Was he actually doing an overhead kick as a model for the picture?
I don't know. The picture I've seen with him, he's got his broken leg, or whatever he's done.
Maybe that's how he broke it.
Maybe.
No, I'm looking at a picture of the Cheadle end, and the idea that a football club with that stand, with that fan base, is having to borrow money to buy kits to sell that may or may not achieve enough money to pay back the supplier, which means that the bloke running the shop would have to buy them. Oh my gosh, honestly, what? I don't know. I don't know how they showed their faces at the ground. I really do not know.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, so I don't know if we're not moving along too swiftly into the football. I mean, I wrote it down somewhere. Where were we? We got hammered at home, didn't we? It was the first game of the season. We got tanked by Boston. Then we drew. Then we got tanked at Alty. Lost at home to Colwyn Bay. And then we lost at Harrogate, which was when it all kicked off again. And I know that there was an altercation between Ryan and some of the fans. I don't know if you've been to Harrogate, but their clubhouse runs along behind one of the goals. And I think a lot of county fans were in there because we were that poor. They decided to stay in there. But apparently he got abused and threatened and all that lot. And then Bogie came out and actually resigned on the pitch. Told, I don't know if Spencer was there, but Ryan was certainly there. But we were doing our sort of summing up on the radio, and I'd said to Liggins, something's going on there. Look, he's certainly, he doesn't look happy. And then Ryan came up and told us on air that he'd resigned. And I know there's people out there who say he was the worst manager or whatever, but you put yourself in his suit. He'd taken on a full-time job with the promise of a full-time staff, and then with like 3 weeks to go, had to get a load of non-league players from an area that he didn't know because he'd never lived there. And all right, he didn't get them to do what he wanted to do, but he certainly didn't make him the worst manager we ever had, because he had the rug well and truly pulled from under him.
Yeah.
His record's terrible, and he'll tell you that. I mean, I've spoken to Ian Bogie since he's left the club, and he's back in football, he's back at Newcastle, but at the time, it was his biggest regret was that he didn't actually resign at that Monday night meeting.
Yeah.
When they told him that, and then he said, hand on heart, I didn't want to be seen as somebody who walked away, and in the end, I was somebody who walked away. And he, by his own admission, it was his own fault.
Well, there's a lesson in life there, isn't there? If it don't feel right, don't do it. You know what I mean? Yeah. So he should have gone. He should have said, look, you know, if you're going to go part-time, that's not what I've come here for. And I wish you luck with it. I don't look back at Ian Bogie as a failure in any sense, really. I just don't think he ever had a chance.
No, and listen, you know, there's been, in our time of going, there's been managers with worse records than that for longer periods who saw it through because they didn't want to walk away from the money. Yeah, exactly. I think you look at it and you say, it might have only been a part-time wage, but at least he had the guts to give it up.
Yeah, exactly.
Didn't ask for any money, just walked away. It took him a long time to get back into football as well, because obviously it tarnished his reputation big time.
Well, I mean, how many managers have we finished?
But I mean, Lordy then took over again. I think I've told you before, in that 3.5 years, including Lordy's 2 caretaker spells, I think I had 10 managers.
That's just unbelievable, honestly.
So I think Lordy was in charge 3 times. 3 times as caretaker and once as joint caretaker. It was, but you know, we went through them in a very, very, very quick period of time.
I think we've got form on that though, haven't we? Because I was watching the replay of the 2-1 away at Southampton on Saturday, and the commentators pitched up and said that post-war we'd had the most managers out of all the clubs at that point in 1997.
Yeah. Well, Danny Bergara, 6 years, is the second longest serving manager in Stockport County's history until obviously if Jim surpasses it in an unbroken period. I don't think he has yet, has he? Not done 6 years. But so Danny Bergara with 6 years is our second longest serving manager.
Yeah, because that stat you quoted, Russ, from the game. I always remember that being a stat right up until the 80s, probably until Bergara took over himself.
Well, Fred Stewart.
We held that record.
Fred Stewart was our manager, I'm not sure the exact term years, but he left and ended up winning the FA Cup with Cardiff, didn't he? So he was our longest serving manager until 89, till 88, 89 when Danny came in and left in 95.
We must have averaged probably not much more than a manager a year throughout the 70s and 80s. It'd be worth looking at, actually, because it'd be easy enough to find the stats. I reckon we had close to 20 managers in those 2 decades. Won't be far off. Going into Lordy, I mean, he sort of, I think he won his first game. Yeah, he did. He beat Gainsborough.
Yeah.
And I think we drew with Leamington, and we lost at Vauxhall Motors, and that was a strange one because I remember Steve was at that game. I don't know. I think Steve Bellis came as a guest of the club. Their old boardroom, it's all changed now. They've had the ground done up, but their old boardroom used to be sort of behind a corner flag behind the goal. It faced the pitch, but it was sort of, it was a strange little place.
Next to the parts counter.
Yeah, well, that was the game where Ryan took 4 of our stewards and made them sit around him in the stand because he was worried that he was going to get attacked. Because if you've ever been to Vauxhall Motors, it hasn't improved that much. You've got a lovely new clubhouse and everything, which is really good, but they still only got a tiny little main stand and with no power in, which is great when you're doing podcasts and stuff like that. And then they've got a little stand across the way. But yeah, so we had, I think it was 4 stewards, all might have been 6, but all went from our ground and sat in a little protective circle around them in the stand. And we got 2-1.
I mean, when we're talking about dark days on the pitch, I mean, all the stuff off the pitch, is horrific. It really is. But dark days on the pitch, I think this is the season for me, because this is the one where we lost to Rushall at home. I think towards the end, I've just got the stats in front of me. Towards the end of the season, we went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games without scoring a goal until the very last game of the season.
I'd long gone by then, Russ. I sort of went to the chairman and said, "Look, I'm no longer prepared to carry the title of commercial manager because I can't do it. I'm not being, I wasn't being a coward or anything. I was facing people that I've known for 20, 30 years who wouldn't give me money. And I'm talking some very, people that you would know if I told you who they were. They've been in and around the club, sponsoring the club for many, many years. And, some of them have been on the front of the shirt before now, who just as friendly as they were to me were saying, sorry, Phil, not putting any more money in that club until he's gone. And it became, there was no point in me fronting it because I knew I wasn't actually doing the job properly. It wasn't my job anyway. Ryan certainly wasn't driving it. He wasn't bringing any business in, regardless of what that email said about talking to potential investors. They never came in. So I just said, look, I think the club needs to take on somebody to do the job properly, and I'll concentrate on the other 3 jobs. And it became a real issue then because the chairman wanted me to resign altogether. And I said, what do you mean resign? He said, well, you can't resign from one part of your job. I said, well, it's not my job. My contract quite clearly says that I am the press officer and retail manager. No mention of me being a commercial manager on my contract. And it became a real war of words, and it wasn't nice. It wasn't nice for anybody, including people that were working with me, because the atmosphere in the office was, quite clear that the students were all going to listen to Ryan and do what he asked. There was lots of things not being done that were supposed to be done. We ended up having a bit of a row that was witnessed by other people who quite clearly saw that I wasn't the aggressor in the argument. And it never, I put in a grievance and it got thrown out, and I got asked to resign. And I said, well, I'm not resigning over a grievance I put in a grievance. What are you going to do about it? We're not going to do anything about it. In fact, we're going to make you redundant. And I said, well, how can you make me redundant? The club needs a press officer. The club needs a retail manager. But we're making you redundant because you've said you're not going to do your job anymore. And I was like, well, it's not my job. I'm just a fund. If you read what we put out in the press statement, if you read what's been said, I'm not actually employed as a commercial manager. Anyway, in the end, I accepted redundancy because from my point of view, my family were going through it. People that knew me and know me know that the best thing to do was be the better man and walk away. And it broke me out because, I've been involved in that football club for pretty much all my life, from being a kid, from being a kid in the youth team and as an adult, getting over exuberant and then sort of, putting my heart...
You're so-called fan.
As a Tory, whenever I'm down in London and I find myself short of quail's eggs, I head down to Covent Garden to replenish my stock. And if I want eggs in Stockport, I head to @Covent Garden.
94 Lower Hillgate in the heart of Stockport Old Town. Come and visit @Covent Garden for quality breakfast and lunch, fantastic coffee, cakes, light snacks, and above all, a friendly place with great service. Open match days.
Yeah, I'm a so-called fan. Well, even more so these days. So yeah, it became, the thing is, I've kept all the emails. I've got the email trail from everything, and I've not said anything during these podcasts that didn't happen. It all happened, and I'm glad that things have turned around for the club. They'll always be my team, but I'm not sure it'll ever be my club again, because it ruins your relationship with, the club that you've grown up in. Like you just said, Dave, it's Stockport. If you're from Norwich, you've heard of Norwich City. You know what I mean? I still go to the odd game. I mean, I'm quite lucky that I work for the non-league paper, and I get to watch football most weeks, and I occasionally get to watch County, which is nice, but very rarely at Edgley Park.
So at what point did you leave the club then? Was that around the Harrogate Town match?
I got made redundant on my wedding anniversary, Russ. Thanks for asking. Yeah, my last game was the Kyle Jacobs cracker game. Brighouse Town in the FA Cup.
Oh yeah,
we're an absolute worldie from Kyle. Yeah. But that was it. September, so I think I only did about maybe 8-9 games of that. But it was weird because I immediately got asked to do the reports for the paper, and I was doing local radio as well. And then I got an email saying I wasn't welcome in the press box because the chairman didn't like the fact that people get asking me why I'd left, and I kept telling them. So I just walked away. Really, it was a case of, it wasn't worth the hassle. People that know me know that, I did my best, and if it wasn't good enough, it wasn't good enough. But I did, I certainly wasn't the one that was turning sponsors away. And I'm glad Steve did come. Funny enough, Steve Bellis came in, and I played a part in him coming back in. And then, because I'd said I didn't want to do commercial anymore, he brought Chris Jolly back, and that really sort of effectively closed the door on me altogether, which was, fine.
What a fucking indictment that is, though, that someone like you, who's been going for, it's probably past 50 years now, isn't it?
Well, at that time, it was 46, 47.
But just became persona non grata. It's absolutely disgraceful.
I mean, let's be honest. I'm not. Because I was there as an individual, people would ask me why I'd left, and I'd tell them the truth. I probably should have just said I can't tell you.
Yeah.
But
even so,
at the end of the day, I played my part in me not being allowed to report at games because I told people what they wanted to hear. Well, I told them what had actually happened. And if I'm the chairman, I don't want people there telling people what an arsehole I am. And the sad thing is, he resigned not long after. So he waited till I'd gone, and then he resigned.
Could you see your way to coming back as a fan under the new regime? Or are you doing other stuff now with non-league paper?
I'm a fan. I was at Nuneaton. If I'm honest, I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would. I enjoyed it because it was my son's first ever. I'd seen him lift the 4th Division trophy and nothing apart from Wembley. And obviously, my son was only about 8, well, maybe 10 at Wembley.
Yeah,
a little bit more. But even so, it was the first title they'd won since the first title that I saw in my first season. So I was pleased for him and his friends that I drove down to the game. I didn't feel it as much, and I wanted to, but I just couldn't. I was happy.
Yeah.
I sat with Bully's family, and it was nice to be sat with people that you know, and I enjoyed the game. But then you hear people in the stands saying, "Look at the so-called fans on the pitch ruining the presentation." It just annoys you when. Yeah, I understand they shouldn't have been on the pitch, but for God's sake, they've just had 6 years in the lowest division they've ever been in most people's lifetime. Of course they're excited. Of course they want to be on the pitch. I'm not saying they're right to be on the pitch, but I understand why they were on the pitch.
Yeah.
It's funny that we picked up on that, didn't we, Dave?
Yeah.
At the time, that sort of bit of commentary, we were messaging each other going, what the actual... What?
Yeah. It's tricky because everybody wanted to see County get the trophy in the middle of the pitch with the little stand that they put up, and that's fine. I think the blame needs to be at the administrators, whoever it might have been, whether it was from the league or whether it was Nuneaton or whatever, to not realise that was going to happen. So you either arrange to have the presentation up on the platform where they eventually did it, or you do something to just sort of say, look, we'll turn it round and we'll face the crowd, because a lot of the people coming out from behind the goal were doing so because the bloody stand they were putting up was facing the main stand with about 38 people in it. The three sides of the ground that were packed with County fans weren't going to be able to face the thing.
The shame of it, Nuneaton. I mean, to be fair to Nuneaton, it was the biggest day in their history, regardless of getting relegated. The biggest crowd they've ever had in their history. They did everything they possibly could. They gave all the ground to us. And every other presentation in Vanarama history and National League history has taken place on the middle of the pitch. The trouble is, it's never taken place in the middle of the pitch when you've got a sizable, the biggest away following that division's ever seen, I would imagine. So, it wouldn't have took a genius to work out it just couldn't have happened. I covered the season before when Salford won it. I covered that game for Radio Manchester. And the same thing happened, but literally a third of the size of the pitch, size of the crowd. So they were quickly dispersed. It was on social media all week, courtesy of Nuneaton, how many County fans were going to be at that game. somebody from Vanarama / National League should have said, do you know what? We're not going to be able to do this. We need, like Dave just said, let's just make sure that everybody's aware that at the end of the game, the presentation is going to be up on the stand. That's one of the foibles of non-league football. It is still, to many respects, it's still run by, older people who genuinely, it's, well, we don't behave like that. We're non-league. Unfortunately, you've got a team that have got a massive fan base compared to every other non-league, well, pretty much every other non-league team. And that team has just suffered its worst 6 years of league placings, and they've got the chance of getting within one table of being back in a football league. Of course they're going to turn up. Of course. And, let's be honest, as soon as County scored, that was it, game over. It was like a procession after that, and it was just a really, people were just enjoying the day, but they were never not going on the pitch. And I don't think you can condone County fans for that. And it really disappoints me when I hear people saying that, County fans ruined it for those who wanted to see it. They didn't.
Yeah.
Nobody got.
Make your minds up as well.
Nobody died. It was a joyous celebration, and the non-league paper didn't make. I mean, nobody said to me, make sure you put it in the report. I gave up the report that day. Somebody else did it, but nobody said to me, how bad was it? Nobody said, there was trouble. It was just like over exuberance, and that's all it was.
From so-called fans.
And it was the end to the dark days.
Can I go back to what we were saying before about the fact that the club had decided that we were going to have fewer football supporters in the ground. We were going to not sell any tickets. If people bought them, great, but if they didn't, it didn't matter because we weren't going to have anybody who would actually actively promote it. And as we saw in the season that we did eventually get promoted, 5,000-6,000 fans will turn up to County if you give them something to cheer about, right? I'm just going to, in the spirit of the dark days, I'm just going to read to you 3 lowest attendances from this year. So we've been relegated into part-time regional football, right? And we had 2,135. These are home games, Stockport County. 2,108 and 2,070. Except they aren't the 3 lowest. We also had 1,941 at home at Stockport County and 1,884 at home at Stockport County. And on the 4th of February 2014, at home to Vauxhall Motors, 1,424 people turned up to Edgeley Park to watch Stockport County. And Ryan McKnight and his paymasters were responsible for that. The amount of money they cost themselves by being negative is just unbelievable. They could have had 3 times those crowds. All they had to be was ambitious. It's honestly, it's devastating. 1,424. I think the season before we'd averaged 900 away. I can't actually forgive them for the shit that they created at the club and the embarrassment that we had to go through. And this was a time when I put something on Yellowboard about. I'd put something about a conversation I had with Chris Bramall, which we've discussed, the Project Salisbury. And about 5 or 6 games in, and it was clear it wasn't going to go well. I put, look, the first person who buys a season ticket next year, expecting it to be to be any different, and that's the key part of this, will be moron number 1. We actually had some fans made T-shirts up saying "proud to be a moron." In the fan base, we had, "You've got to support the club through thick and thin." Well, of course you do. Of course you support the club through thick and thin. We have done. The fans have played the part all the way through this. But there's also a responsibility on us, I feel, as fans, when the club is being run in such a diabolical manner, to say, fucking stop. Stop what you're doing. Don't do this anymore. This is diabolical. This is embarrassing. You're making things worse. Stop. And if you can't stop, if you're on this treadmill and you can't stop, fuck off. Let somebody else have a go. And I don't. If we ever get to that situation again, I hope not. If we ever get to that, I hope the fans collectively respond differently. Rather than getting T-shirts saying "proud to be a moron," fucking do something about it.
Yeah, but at a football club, you get all the different selections of fans, don't you? And you're always going to have the scarfers, the happy clappers, that will just blindly walk up, just blindly pay the season ticket money and go despite what's happening. And they're probably in denial that something's wrong. I remember being part of the co-op when I sort of first joined the co-op and trying to get new members in. And was it it was the co-op. I was getting this bit mixed up, but it was the co-op. Stood on Mercy and Way at the traffic lights. People are going past. I got called a trouble causer at least half a dozen times. Because you're canvassing for change, you want to do something different, but you're a trouble causer because it'll all be all right. Football clubs don't go out of existence; it'll go back up. It'll all even out at the end of the season. Will it fuck? You've got to do something about it. And I remember it being got. More to be fair, more people stopped me and asked me what was it all about? What were we trying to do? But the negative people stick out, don't they? And it's those blind happy clappers that really get on my nerves. And to be fair, at the time, I did buy a season ticket. I kept on buying a season ticket because I still wanted to go and watch football.
It wasn't a question of you were moron if you bought a season ticket. It was a moron if you thought it was going to be any different, because this was a pattern that was set in a club, not by accident, but by design. It had been organised and structured in such a way that this was us now. We are part-time, regional football, scraping by. And it was, and I know what you're saying about, I don't want to, in the same way that I've protected and defended the so-called fans, I'm going to protect and defend the happy clappers because they are still fans, and obviously, they might even have a sort of moral high ground to say, well, I'm not going to do anything to upset my football club. I accept that. But when you look around and see these teams, Colwyn Bay, Gainsborough Trinity, Leamington, Rushall Olympic, North Ferriby, Oxford City, Bradford Park Avenue, Histon, Vauxhall Motors, Stalybridge Celtic, Guiseley. I mean, for crying out loud, what does it take? When you look and you're sat in the ground and there's 1,424 people in an 11,000 capacity stadium and you're playing Vauxhall Motors, if you look around and think, this is going all right, you need to have a word with yourself. And if you look around and think, I'm not going to say anything because, I don't want to rock the boat. Fuck me, the boat's sunk and you're on it.
I just remember it so vividly. I mean, I was attending co-op meetings once, twice a week, and trying to get the membership up and getting the Guardian account sorted and all these kind of things. And every time a new result passed, Rushall Olympic, I kept on saying, like, to my son, it was his first season as his season ticket, and my wife and that, I was saying, it's another new low for County. We've just been beat by fucking Rushall Olympic.
Histon with full fans or whatever it was.
Yeah, and I remember, every time, it's another new low. And then when we went to play Colwyn Bay away, right at the end, and we're all stood in Colwyn Bay village centre or whatever centre. It's not a town. Well, I suppose it is a small town, isn't it? It's completely dead. Bank holiday weekend, I think. And I remember my uncle Steve saying to me, he's a massive County fan for years and years, and he just said, well, you've got to remember these days, haven't you? Because when it gets better, you can say you were there. And I'm thinking, I remember thinking at the time, no, but this is shit, Steve. Look where we're
the same thing about 10 miles away in Carnarvon.
So yeah, it was just full of new lows, and yeah, I totally accept it. I wasn't going with the expectation that it was going to things were going to change just miraculously. Because the way I did it, the way I appeased myself was I was doing something. I was trying to do something with the co-op. Do you know what I mean? And trying to do something off the field. So going back to when Phil left, then obviously Ryan McKnight was still there at the time. I remember being part of the co-op, and I met Ryan a couple of times. And the word that sticks out for me that he said consistently and repeatedly was devolution. We've got to devolve the club. We've got to apply devolution to the club. And I'm just like, I was just in the back of my head, I'm just thinking, but you're breaking it up. That's what you're doing. You're taking it back down to its fucking bare bones. And the only reason why I went to meeting was because nobody else in the co-op would. So
did he mean devolution? Oh, I'm not sure he's got that right, has he?
Was the other one.
But devolution means passing power from central government to local government. What's he talking about?
Well, that's the word. That's the word that he said, and he was going to do like a press conference. I can't remember what it was about at the time now. Fucking, because he just tried to baffle me with bullshit. And I work in a corporate environment, so I'm pretty good at knowing when someone's a bullshitter and they're just coming out with fucking hot air. Do you know what I mean? And the word, devolution and devolve were the words that he was saying in some sort of context around. I don't fucking know. I was just sat there going, "Fucking get me! I need to go home."
All I was going to say is, look, I'm as a Stockport County fan, very, very pleased to see that they are back on the way back. It's a shame that obviously this period that I was working at the club was so shambolic, and not just for everything that went on. It would have been great to have worked at a club in a much happier time, and I am very glad that things are getting better. And I'll always be a fan of the football team, and I hope that Jim breaks that record of being the longest-serving manager.
Definitely.
Cool. And I think with that, we'll close Dark Days Part 5, and we'll continue the Dark Days series in another 5 months' time.
But when we're all locked down for wave 2 of COVID.
Wave 2 of COVID, yeah. Phil, will you be joining us on the next Dark Days, or is that your contribution over now?
I'll join in from afar, because obviously I wasn't attending many games. I did actually do a couple of co-cons while Ryan was on his holiday that he took in mid-season. I was mysteriously asked to come back to the club.
I remember that. Well, I remember him taking a holiday mid-season. Okay, let's wrap it up.
Thanks very much, fellas. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, cheers, lads.
See you later.